You're not a politician. You're a media fabrication designed to appear relevant." The words echoed through the university auditorium like a blade gliding over skin, not enough to cut, but sharp enough to freeze the room. Karoline Leavitt, the youthful spokesperson for the conservative faction, sat with her legs elegantly crossed before the camera, a slight smirk playing at her lips as she spoke. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. A handful of hesitant claps followed, caught, somewhere between agreement and skepticism. Opposite her, Jasmine Crockett remained still. She didn't frown, didn't speak. Her eyes locked onto Karoline's for a few silent seconds. A gaze that cut deeper than words. Then she looked down, methodically gathered her documents, shut her laptop, and stood. No explanation. No dramatic exit. No claims of being insulted. She simply rose and walked away. The cameras remained on. The host stayed silent. Karoline's smirk faltered slightly as if realizing her victory felt hollow. Just as Jasmine reached the first stair, a freshman rose from their seat. No applause, no slogans, just stood. Others followed, then a third, a fourth. By the time Jasmine turned around, the entire audience was on its feet, not cheering, just standing. "Where are you watching this from? Drop the name of your city or school in the comments. And if you believe that sometimes silence speaks louder than speech, leave a comment and subscribe." Let's rewind to the beginning. The broadcast took place in Brighton University's main hall, a respected East Coast institution for media and public affairs. The set blended modern tech with a traditional academic aesthetic, wood-paneled stage, navy curtains, and a curved seating arrangement. Behind the guests, a glowing sign read, "Campus Voices," the title of the school's flagship political debate series, aired both online and on cable. The debate topic sounded harmless enough: politics and media, who truly holds power? But the guests told a different story. Representing the right, Karoline Leavitt, once the youngest White House press staffer, now a vocal face of Gen Z conservatism. She had a reputation for her cutting critiques and once described the BLM movement as emotional hysteria shaped by press narratives. Opposite her sat Jasmine Crockett, attorney, congresswoman, and a fierce advocate for disenfranchised groups. More than a lawmaker, she had become a voice for the unheard. The moderator, a senior professor in political science, introduced both speakers with balanced language, though subtle bias leaned toward Karoline. "We welcome a voice forged in the heart of Washington, and another grounded in the lived experience of modern voters." Applause was lopsided. Media and business students, mostly to the right, clapped loudly for Karoline. Law and social studies students offered Jasmine a quieter, more reserved welcome. The divide wasn't shouted, but it hung thick in the air. Karoline opened with a quote from Malcolm Gladwell, used out of context, to frame her thesis. She spoke confidently about media-driven narratives and justice as emotion. Her crescendo came with the jab at Jasmine. "That's why some politicians today are merely products of media, designed to seem relevant." The hall froze. The host glanced over cautiously. A student from the right recorded Jasmine's expression. But she gave nothing away, just a slow blink. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. The host nodded toward Jasmine. Her response was quiet but steady. "I came here because students extended an invitation, not to argue or trade insults. If the aim is to dismiss someone by calling them a product, then maybe you should question if you're echoing or contributing." Sparse applause from the left. Karoline was ready with her comeback. "I'm not discrediting personal journeys. I'm asking, would your career exist without media packaging you as a symbol?" the audience murmured. Someone whispered, "Isn't that too personal?" Again, Jasmine said nothing. She organized her papers. The growing tension was no longer in the exchanges, but in what was being withheld. Karoline kept pushing. "Talent is one thing, but governance requires logic, not emotional storytelling. The moderator eyed the clock. 15 minutes left. But Jasmine stood up. No fanfare, no announcement. She packed her things, buttoned her jacket. Thank you for having me. I think I've said enough. The host hesitated. Karoline looked disarmed. Jasmine walked off stage, and then came the moment that changed everything. The doors hadn't closed yet when one student rose. No reason, just stood. Another joined, then more. A rising tide of silent solidarity, Karoline noticed, shifted uneasily. I don't think walking out is brave. It's what you do when you're out of arguments. Even her supporters were quiet now. Mocking someone absent didn't feel triumphant. This is what concerns me, Karoline added. That our generation worships pain, not solutions. Remove the media, remove the narrative. Would Jasmine even be here? One tech crew member whispered, "We invited her because of her work, not her virality." A student in a red hoodie raised a hand to speak, but the host motioned for patience. Karoline wasn't done. We confuse silence with strength. If everyone walks away, who remains to solve the issues? The division became more visible. Students shifted, murmured. A freshman from the conservative club who had laughed loudly earlier now looked down, hands motionless. The moderator tried to steer the tone. If we tune out logic and amplify sentiment, do we still feel grounded? Karoline wasn't visibly rattled, but her words no longer resonated. A girl in the aisle stood, no sign, no speech, just stood. The moderator asked if she wished to speak. She shook her head. A professor whispered, "She's mirroring Jasmine." Karoline forced a smirk. So, standing is the new way to win debates? A weak laugh echoed. It died quickly. The host concluded, maybe standing isn't about winning. Maybe it's about resisting the reduction of truth into a punchline. Another chair moved. Then another. The lights dimmed slightly as if the equipment itself was reacting. Jasmine had only taken 4 steps down the stairs when she stopped. Not because she was called, but because of the freshman in row 5 standing still, eyes locked on hers. She turned. One look, no nod, no smile, just acknowledgement. A girl in gray joined him. No eye contact, just response. The camera panned as a third stood. Karoline straightened up, confused. Her certainty faded. Students whispered, "They're standing with her." The silent wave moved row by row. Even Ben Tyler, VP of the Conservative Club, rose. He had clapped hardest for Karoline. Now he stood. Karoline, surprised, asked, "Ben, you support Jasmine?" His reply was calm. "I support no one, but I think calling her a product was wrong. No cheers, just release. A girl in a Liberty sweatshirt. Once mocking, now stood." Some emotions are spontaneous. They arise when you witness dignity treated poorly. Karoline looked away. The host gently asked, "Karoline, any final thoughts before Jasmine departs?" Her voice lost its sharpness. "I won't apologize. I still question media influence, but today I saw something else. Silence has power. No applause. Just wait." Jasmine nodded. Not approval, just recognition. She exited. The host spoke softly. "Maybe today logic didn't win. Maybe change doesn't always shout. Sometimes one quiet step can shift everything." And just then, someone backstage captured the moment. Jasmine walking away, a sea of students on their feet behind her. Not a debate, a declaration without sound. Not because she spoke, because they stood. Maybe no one won that day. No arguments swayed minds, no logic shifted beliefs. But if one person walking away could cause an entire hall to rise in silence, then maybe that's someone who no longer needs to explain themselves. Just then, a crew member backstage snapped a photo. Jasmine, caught mid-stride as she exited, rows of students behind her, all on their feet. No signs, no slogans, just stillness. The image, posted by a lighting tech with a single caption, "She didn't ask." Them to stand, but they did. Traveled beyond the Brighton University campus in under 7 minutes. No clickbait, no drama-laced title. Just a moment. Within 3 hours, the image had been shared over 160,000 times. On X, on TikTok, students at other schools began recreating the moment. Clips of classmates rising in silent solidarity as one peer quietly left the room. No speeches, no music. Just the soft hum of fans or wind through open windows. Hashtags like, "They stood one by one," and "She didn't ask," began trending worldwide. On Facebook, a mother from Indiana shared the clip her child sent with a simple message. "Mom, don't worry. We're not yelling, we're just standing." "I cried," she wrote. "Not for Jasmine, but because my child understood. Sometimes silence speaks loudest." In Kentucky, a literature teacher printed the photo and pinned it to the classroom wall, adding a quote beneath, "No one told them to stand, but everyone had a reason not to stay seated." Meanwhile, Leavitt, a prominent right-leaning news outlet, released an edited version of the talk. Jasmine's exit was cut short by 20 seconds. The footage of students rising was slowed down, darkened, and overlaid with tense music. Karoline's audio was boosted. Silent gaps were filled with narration. This is a textbook case of emotional persuasion, where group behavior is used to blur the line between truth and sympathy. That version of the video collected over 5,000 comments in a single day, some defending it, many criticizing it. One user replied, "They didn't rise to agree. They rose because no one should be publicly disrespected while the rest of us just sit and watch." The New York Times published a deeper analysis. The event wasn't about winning. Karoline wasn't entirely wrong. Jasmine didn't need to dismantle her arguments. But when one person stops, then another, then a room full, all without instruction, that's not about debate. That's about instinct. You don't have to win an argument to be right. Sometimes, you just have to know when to leave and trust others to follow. Jasmine Crockett gave no interviews. Her social media went quiet for 2 days. On the 3rd day, she posted just one sentence. "Not everyone can speak, but anyone can stand." The post received over 2 million likes in less than 14 hours. Karoline later appeared on a podcast with supporters. Asked how she felt afterward, she replied, "I don't take back what I said, but I didn't expect silence to hit as hard as it did. I think I have more to learn about how people choose who to stand with." The host agreed, but the tone had shifted. Across universities, Jasmine's walkout became a case study in media and behavioral science classes. A professor at UCLA ended a session with this: "You can argue against a person's words, but when they say nothing, and the room still rises. What is that telling us?" Silence. Then a hand went up. "It's not about the argument," a student said. "It's about how someone is treated." A week after the talk, students at Brighton reprinted the photo. No branding, no tagline. They handed out free copies at the campus gates. Each one came with a blank sheet and one question. Who made you want to stand just by how they were treated? Over 200 responses came in. Everyone different. A columnist for The Atlantic wrote, "We used to ask when to speak, how to resist, what to say. Now we have something else, the option to stand. Not because we're told to, not because we're moved by words, but because something within us knows. It's time." 6 days after the event, a large format print of the photo appeared in the university library's main hallway. No caption, no logos, just Jasmine leaving, students behind her, upright, silent, still, no spotlight, no movement, just a captured breath in time, when someone was dismissed and others decided that staying seated wasn't neutral anymore, in a Texas Media Studies class, the professor played the video and paused it at the 47-second mark, just as Jasmine quietly gathered her papers. She asked, "If it were you, what would you do if you were insulted like that and no one stood up for you?" One student said, "I'd speak up." Another said, "I'd walk out." But a girl in the back whispered, "I don't know if I'd be that brave. But if someone else stood first, I think I'd follow." The conversation had shifted. This wasn't about politics or media spins anymore. It had become a story about presence. You don't need perfect logic. You don't need a winning point. You don't even need a voice. You just need to be there when it matters and choose not to. Look away. At a freshman orientation in Minnesota, a Brighton alum gave a short speech. We were taught to speak clearly, make our point. But sometimes, the most powerful thing isn't what you say. It's whether you stand when someone next to you has nothing left to say. The auditorium fell quiet. Later that weekend, Jasmine quietly reshared the original photo. No caption. No filter, just the moment. In the comments, someone older wrote, "I thought our time had passed, but when I saw them rise, I realized the fire had never gone out. It was just waiting in the quiet for the right moment to be carried forward." If you've read this far, it's not for the arguments, not for the drama. It's because deep down, you recognized something familiar. Maybe you've seen someone overlooked, dismissed, or shamed just for being different. Maybe you did nothing. Maybe you froze. But if someone stood up first today, ask yourself, what number would you be? Leave a comment. It doesn't have to be long, just one sentence. Have you ever stood for someone? Have you wanted to, but stayed silent, or just type a single dot? So we know you're here too, and tell us where you're watching from. New York, Lagos, Seoul, a quiet dorm, or a coffee shop where you're sitting alone. We want to know how far this moment travels, because even when you can't speak, you can still stand. And sometimes, that's the loudest thing we can do.